Helen Jean. I'm the Jacquie Dorrance Curator for Fashion Design here at Phoenix Art Museum, and I have the distinct honor of welcoming our guests tonight to to speak about pink. I have braces, and it makes it a little hard for all of these tongue twisters. But we have a wonderful panel tonight to talk about the science and the history of pink. Before we dive in, how many of us were able to make it upstairs and see the exhibitions? Oh, good. The museum will still be open for a little bit after we're done this evening, so if you didn't make it upstairs, please do run back up. Also, on Wednesday evenings, we are open late. It's pay as you wish, so please come back and see us frequently. The Fashion Design Collection here at the museum was founded in 1966 by the Arizona Costume Institute. They hosted a wonderful meet and greet a little bit earlier for prospective members. There's about 250 members in that organization. They purchase objects for the collection. They host openings and bring speakers out, and they help steward the collection through all of the important fundraising. The exhibition that we have upstairs, Barbie, a Cultural Icon, is on tour. We have one of our panelists this evening, Karan Feder, is here to represent and talk about pink from that perspective. The other exhibition, The Power of Pink, is drawn from Phoenix Art Museum's Fashion Design Collection. We host original exhibitions and tours every year. We're one of 7 fashion collections in the country that exhibits and produces programming at this level. So thank you all for coming out this evening. We're going to talk about pink from a few different perspectives. But first, we're going to just go around and introduce ourselves very quickly. I, again, am Helen Jean. I work with the collection here at the Art Museum. And I'm going to pass the microphone off to Miss Teresa.
Hi, I am Teresa Devine. I am an associate professor of interdisciplinary art and performance on the West Campus of ASU. My more informal title is I'm a professor of art, games, toys, and play, and I will be talking about games tonight.
Karan, if you would please introduce yourself.
Yes, hello. I'm happy to be with you here this evening. My name is Karan Feder, and I am the curator of the Barbie exhibition upstairs and author of the accompanying book called Barbie Takes the Catwalk. I'm a costume historian by trade.
Thank you. And Kevin, if you would introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin McGraw. I'm a professor at Arizona State University in the School of Life Sciences, and I'm a color scientist. So I'm interested in animals and how and why animals are colorful, including those that happen to be pink.
So we've invited these special guests here today because pink is a very serious color. It has so much meaning. We've imbued all of these different values to a color that exists. It has very important reasons for why it exists. And then we've created all of this emotion around it, all these needs that we have, all of these feelings that we put onto pink, and we've invented all of that. And so I wanted to give us an opportunity to talk about where does pink come from, how does it appear in the world, and a little bit of information about how humans have taken this color and applied it to our artwork, to our wardrobes, and to our lives. So we wanted to start off, I put this together. It's just some iconic images of pink. Can anyone identify what this first image, do we know who this lady is? Marilyn Monroe. What's the film? Gentlemen prefer blondes. And the song? Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend. Very, very, very much so. Next, does anyone know what this color is called? The shocking pink. Elsa Schiaparelli introduced this color in the late 1930s, early 1940s, and it is a very iconic, hot, burning, energetic pink. Next, does anyone know what this is? Has anyone encountered pink in its natural form in the environment before it's been produced into a textile dye? This is Brazil wood. And then lastly, pink diamonds have been some of the largest diamonds ever recovered out of the earth. And so it's just had such a remarkable appearance in our lives. We've given it such interesting power. And so today we're going to unpack some of the fascinating science and history behind the color. So we're going to start off in the natural world, and I'm going to hand it off to Kevin.
As a teacher, I'm going to get up and walk and talk here. I hope you can entertain me here in thinking for just a few minutes about where pink comes from, what it means in the natural world. So it is a delight to be here, and in fact, I can't think of anywhere else I'd rather be. Yeah, I know, my joke's stinks, sorry. Anyways, we'll leave all that behind and think about things, that we might be a little more familiar with here in the desert. We can see a bunch of pink things here in this nice slide. And if I could get the slide advancer, that will help me work my way through what I hope are some interesting facts, some interesting examples that you can carry with you, and thinking a little deeper about the hows and the whys, even in the wheres of pink in the natural world, right? So maybe thinking beyond astronomy, beyond geology, which probably take the cake, so to speak, and the sort of origins of pink things. Maybe just a little interactive start here with the crowd, and ask you to kind of just close your eyes, sort of focus on your sensory capabilities mentally, and just think through what are the colors of the world? What comes to mind? Yeah, this is a free sharing evening, so I hear blue, green, here's some brown, here's a yellow, red, black. I didn't hear a word for why we're here tonight, but we'll get there, right? I mean, these are the things that probably got conjured up when you all reflected on your experience, visual, sensory experiences on Earth, right? So you might find yourself in a tropical or temperate forest and think and see green. You might find your way to a coastline and think about the blues or the dark, maybe blacks of the ocean, even the blues of the sky. You start to get into some interesting places, off the beaten paths. Start to see some of the browns, grays, right? We're spanning various shades, various colors of the rainbow, and maybe some of you really went full scale and thought about Earth itself and how we may capture several of these all in one. A few of you may have journeyed down this path towards some of the brilliant hues again that unite us tonight. Right? So I think we can probably come to some agreement that we share some enjoyment over seeing some nice pink hues in a sunset or sunrise. Right? Some of you may be snorkelers or divers. You see some of these just glorious bursts of color on reefs below the water. Though again, in the context of the natural world and perception, many animals actually don't see this as bright color, and in fact, it's actually cryptic and looks a little bit more like that, because some of these colors of wavelengths of light don't make it down far enough to reflect and become the pinks that we see at the surface. So sort of another interesting fact. But when we see the cherry blossoms, for example, in DC, we start to find familiar things in the living world that maybe help us understand what, where, and why pinks may exist. Now, I think of pinks in this way, and these are beautiful creatures that, again, I've devoted my 25-year career to try and understand what in the world are these silly things doing, where do they come from, and why do they exist, right? And so I'm hoping to share a couple vignettes and give you a little flavor for some of my perceptions and understandings for pink in the living world. Anyone ever seen pink robin in Asia? Anyone seen the galah in Australia? All right, we need to go on a field trip. This is class, right? I don't know who's paying, but we'll figure it out later. So I really want you to think about a main message tonight from me that revolves around, as you might have gleaned, the rarity of pink in nature. We didn't stumble in our mental exercise too commonly on pink things. And so to be pink is to be rare. It's to be bold. And as I'll talk a little bit about, on the R-rated side, it can also be a little sexy, right? And in not just humans, but in wild animals, including birds as well. So I'm an evolutionary biologist. I think like Darwin, natural selection, survival and reproduction of the fittest. And so these are fundamental terms that I really want to introduce to you in thinking about the whys. Why might animals be pink? And I bring an example on the survival side of one of these local creatures. You've probably seen or at least heard of, right? Our local Gila monster can have a variety of these pink, unsaturated red shades or hues, even trending towards light desert sand, even orange. But these animals, interestingly, have this color perhaps to blend in, but also perhaps to stand out and showcasing that some of you may know they're actually venomous, and so they can be dangerous, obviously, to something that stumbles onto it. And so if you can be colorful and bold and show off a memorable trait, avoid me, I'm dangerous, right? That's an important thing both for this animal, it doesn't get attacked, right? As well as the other animal that doesn't bother attacking this thing, which would then get envenomated, right? So an interesting kind of survival side to this rare local pink creature. But where I want to spend a little more of our time, I think this will thread through several of the other topics as well, when thinking about breeding and reproduction, right? Which is the name of the game when it comes to the evolution and fitness of species. And, we start to think about the pink things in our lives that, we can't get past food, right? So on the survival side even, you can think about fruits and the information they may contain. I don't know how much you think about it, right? But fruits, in fact, are the reproductive outputs of plants, flowering plants, right? These contain the seeds that, of course, germinate and grow into new versions of themselves. So these are, you're eating some of the breeding parts of a plant by consuming fruit. And, it goes down to another level, and that you may know the reproductive organs of flowering plants are the flowers, right? Which contain gametes that, again, we see in a very loving, sexual relationship sort of fashion as well in the roles in our lives. So this, again, starts us thinking down the path for how other organisms, animals in particular, may be evolving and using pink, right? So I, am very fascinated by the evolution of traits that seem to convey beauty on animals, right? So they're used in sexual attraction. And I'm going to tell you a couple stories that I hope will really stick with you when thinking about, the birds you might see at your backyard feeders, or just some of the interesting animals you encounter and why they may have some of these unique adorned features. So there are a whole bunch of pink birds, and I show you a smattering of them there. And again, for folks that are interested, I'm happy to share my slides, leave them with the museum. What you'd like to interact with them, read them. I've got some videos linked in that you might want to follow up on. But I've studied a handful of these pink birds. And mind you, this is a very, very minor subset of all that are birds. Over 10,000 bird species in the world, and there are literally less than a few dozen that are truly of that pink nature. Now, pink is, again, a version of red. Reds are, fire engine reds are obviously a little different than our Easter egg pinks, and I think that's where we try to pull out several of these creatures, some of which you find in your backyard, like the house finch here. Others that are probably a little more familiar, like the flamingo, pink flamingo, and then others that might have hummingbird feeders locally might recognize that beautiful creature, the male Anna's hummingbird. I'm going to tell you a few stories about some of these animals, again, whet your appetite to think with the group here at large about how and why these animals may exist as they do. Right, so these are my 3 case studies, and I hope bring some science and as well as some artistic appreciation for how these animals, they're literally painting, they're literally accumulating colorful objects in ways where nature meets art, or art imitates nature. Right, so our flaunting flamingos, the pink flamingo, may be familiar to some of you as a classic pink species. I rendered this using an AI tool. I basically told it, draw me a pink flamingo on a coastline with a pink sunset near some pink flowers. And in 5 seconds, it gave me this image. It's astounding. So pretend it's real. It's beautiful. But flamingos are interesting because they are true relics of their diet, right? You may know the classic story. Flamingos are pink because they eat things that contain pigments, right? Things like shrimp. Right, allow them to deposit those pigments into their feathers. So you go to a zoo, or somewhere in nature, you see a very colorful pink flamingo, had a pretty good diet, right? Those that are a little washed out probably didn't eat as well. And I've devoted a ton of my career to study what those pigments are. They're carotenoid pigments. Some of you may have heard of them in carrots and corn, right? These are what mom told you, eat your carrots and corn because it'll make you healthy, help your eyes, right? Those are the precursors to vitamin A. They're antioxidants. And so flamingos, by eating these healthy shrimp, become healthy and colorful themselves. So they're showing off their true colors, their true vibrancy, right, by consuming these rich foods. It doesn't end there. I don't know how many of you knew the story that flamingos use makeup, right? Many birds, flamingos included, have a little oil in a specialized gland right above their behind that they squeeze and rub on their feathers to keep their feathers supple. It's called the preen gland, and it produces preen oil. It's mostly colorless. Flamingos decided, boring. We're going to pinkify our gland. We're going to deposit the pigments we eat in our gland so that when we squeeze it, we get pink oil that we apply as cosmetics on their feathers to become even more pink than they could deposit into their feathers. So when you see a flamingo, right, it's got pink on the inside and the outside. It is doing everything it can to try to be sexy and show off its bold, bright pinkness, right? So really fascinating creatures beyond perhaps some of the stories that you may have heard. I don't know how many of you have heard of the next case study on the great bowerbird. Anyone heard of bowerbirds before, where they're found in the world? They're Australian birds, northern Australian, relatives of birds of paradise. You may have seen all these YouTube videos of dancing smiley face birds and just wildly behaving and displaying. Well, these are relatives of that. And they get their name because they build bowers. The males build a big stick nest, not for the babies to go in, but to show the ladies how studly they are. They can go to all these great lengths and build this gigantic structure for no other purpose than to show off, and she'll then pick the one that builds the biggest, the fastest, the best, right? It doesn't end there. Great bowerbirds have a hidden pink plumage patch on the back of their head that they use to show off to females. And they don't show it off all the time because pink is rare. Pink can attract danger, right? So when the female's nearby, they explode and show off this hidden patch of pink. And if that weren't enough, they then go around and find pink objects in the world and accumulate them and decorate their bower, like at their front doorstep, to show off how extra pink they can become. So again, this is the extension of makeup, right? This is decorating their environment, not even decorating themselves with these cosmetics to become extra colorful. They're even thieves. They'll steal from each other to get extra pink things around them. They'll have to patrol their own space as well as others. Really fascinating role of pink in the lives of these creatures. Historically, they found pink berries, pink petals. Now humans, of course, found throughout the planet. And so they'll find different pink objects, hair ties, bottle caps, and add those in addition to the natural objects to get more and more and more pink things. Fascinating. And then I'll finish with this interesting local species, the Anna's hummingbird. And this is one that I've done some research on. Those first two were other studies. I'm happy to share with you from my colleagues. But these animals are really extraordinary if you had them at your bird feeders. These, again, males show off these bright colors to seduce females. And again, if we have open conversation, I'm happy to talk a little bit about the sex roles and male preferences and displays and female choice. But these animals are interesting in that they will show some of the most dynamic aerial displays in the presence of females, again, to try to seduce them. And we're fortunate to be having this on the heels of Valentine's Day and on the start of animals' breeding seasons, because you can go to a park, Gilbert Water Ranch, and see these animals right in our neighborhoods doing this right now. Males will sing and fan out that throat fan to display to a female, and then ascend about 100 meters into the air, hover, and then dive bomb as fast as he can right in front of the female's face, flashing his bright gorget, just like you saw on the previous slide, and then zipping off to the side, getting some more energy, and trying it again. right? And so again, using this pink in an extreme, exaggerated fashion to go to all the great lengths, again, to acquire a mate, pass on his genes, and leave this legacy into future generations. Right, so pink is not very common, but where pink exists, pink is extraordinary, right? Just leave you with a little thought, and again, colleagues I think will help us think a little bit more about the art and human sides of pink. But it's always fascinated me, the role of human makeup, especially in women, and especially the colors that are picked to help emphasize some of the youthful colors that we see in young children, babies' faces, which again, sexual selection theory argues that women are chosen more by men as partners when they can show off sort of youthfulness. Right? This is a sign of sort of how many reproductive years lie ahead for a woman, and in turn, the more youthful she can appear, right? The more profitable of a mating partner she might be, right? And so it's a really interesting evolutionary psychology discipline that I'm not necessarily a biologist studying, but I really do think that there's some analogies here that the natural world, again, the non-human natural world, mimicking and resembling in many ways the things that we're doing and vice versa. So just to finish, with again another local example, this is one of my study species near and dear to my heart. I've studied backyard birds for over 25 years, and this house finch, again, is a resident, I'm pretty sure, of most of your backyards. They're pink. They'll become red at certain times. They'll eat red foods. And interestingly, pink plays a role in their lives because when they grow their fresh feathers once a year, they actually appear more pink, raspberry. The reason that is because if you can see on the tips of those feathers they grow white tips on the ends of those red feathers, which give it a pink appearance. Those tips are to protect the underlying bold red feathers. Those tips wear off over time so that by the time they get to be bold and colorful during breeding, they're bright and red and sexy for the ladies to choose from. Right? So pink has this very interesting sexual seasonal variation that, again, when you see a bird at our backyards here locally, maybe you think a little twice about what time of year is it, and is it pink or red, and maybe it's revealing something to you more than you would have thought previously. So yeah, I know we've got a great panel here assembled after me, and so I think we're going to probably save time for questions later.
Well, I'd say if anyone has one or two that are specific, I think we
Sure,
could,
yeah, I'm happy to open it up if anyone
entertain
has
a
any
few right
follow-up
now.
thoughts or questions.
Like we have one up in the back.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, great question. So I earlier referred to it as an unsaturated red, right? So it's clearly in the categories of reds, right? And thankfully, we use sort of modern technological instruments like spectrophotometry, which basically measures the reflectance off of a surface and determines how much light for different wavelengths is being passed back to the instrument, from a feather surface, for example. And so we can categorize these, based on the brightness, the hue, the chroma or the saturation, all of which, again, help us hone in on, is something very, very richly red, meaning it's dominated by those long red wavelengths, very little white, very little other colors of the rainbow. That would obviously then fall much more in the category of red, whereas a sort of a flatter peak, if you will, a little bit more white, might help us understand that that's not as dominated by pure red wavelengths, and in fact might be a little more Easter egg pink, little not as peaky, I guess I would say, from a color scientist's perspective. But of course, this is all just one side of the coin, is that you've got sensory receivers, right? Vision of all animals is not created equal, and that includes all of us in the room, right? We differ in our color perceptions. And so what might appear red to some animal might actually be pink to another animal, and that's a whole other fun conversation that we could consider. But really good question, thank you.
Well, thank you. That was
Thank you.
fascinating. And I am still waiting for my hummingbird to dive. Now we're going to pass it on to Teresa Devine to speak about color history and color theory as applied to game design.
Is this still? Yeah, still. So I want to preface my talk a little bit to kind of give it a context. So games are emerging as a medium for art. Okay, and so the games that I've chosen to speak about tonight are games that are really making some headway into presenting themselves as works of art to the institutional art world, capital A art world, which we're in tonight. So that's where we have met, right? And so how I arranged this talk is I'm beginning with a game, and then I'm showing the history that led up to that game. So, and I have a couple different categories. So my first category is sensuality and sexuality. So the first game I want to talk about is Luxuria Suburbia. And I'm going to go through a couple different slides so you can see how this plays when you launch the game. So it begins with a poem, and it says, "You are entering a flower. The flower is blank, but it enjoys color. Your touch will color the flower. If the color becomes too intense, the flower will finish. Sometimes that's what you want, but most often, be gentle and slow. Enjoy." And so it begins like this. And as you play, you click on the hearts, and it colors the tunnel. And so this is what it looks like when you almost are into the end of the level. And so how is this connected to the history of art? Well, we all know about Georgia O'Keeffe and how her flowers have been compared to vaginas and vulvas, and as that kind of symbol of sexuality. She herself denies all of that, right? But there is that common perception out in the world. And when I was in graduate school, we talked a lot about, are we influenced by what we understand or what we misunderstand, right? So in this case, I kind of believe that the game is actually has tapped into Georgia O'Keeffe and that misunderstanding of her work in order to have a similar existence space. Does that make sense? And so this one is actually here at the Phoenix Art Museum. You should take a look at it. It's currently in the North Wing. And then Tom Weissman, he did a whole series of nudes. And again, the color pink has appeared to depict our sexuality. And in his paintings, it's as if the humans are more objects. There's really interesting kind of relationship with sexuality. There's another example. And so he is actually connecting with Matisse and the Odalisques and that whole art history. And later on in his career, he actually literally referenced it in his own work. So here's the deep history of where this sort of work begins, right? So this video game is actually connected to Titian in concept. So my next subject is Pink as Trap, right? And there's actually an indie game called Pink, and this is a horror game about a woman who is trapped in her pink apartment. What is it? Yeah, so this is what the game looks like, and this is a video. A minute of gameplay, but she's trapped. She runs out of food. She runs out of water. Plants start growing out of her ears. I mean, it's an interesting little game. It's free to play, so I encourage you all to look it up. So I saw an interesting connection with Villiard's La Chambre Rose, or the pink bedroom. And what's interesting about his work is he was trying to show people in their own environments in their lives. And I was just like, you know what, this is strangely connected. And perhaps it's just me, but if it's as if that the game is an extension of this painting. Like, is she trapped? And so here's another type of trap, right? So after World War II, pink was used as a propaganda, I suppose is the word, to encourage women to get back into the home, right? So we have Mamie Eisenhower, and of course Marilyn Monroe, and the pink kitchens and bathrooms that we all are very familiar with around here in Phoenix, because the 1950s is strong here. But this was a way to convince women to return to the home, back to the trap, if you will. And so this is a piece where this is life size. What this artist did is they took a toy that was marketed to girls, and they made it into an installation. Right, and so this is a very interesting piece. It's kind of overwhelming to experience a toy at full scale like that. Yeah, it's three-dimensional. It's like a life-size bed, and it's all life-size. It's like you could lay on that bed. And of course, this is one we all know, right? And so this artist started to photograph the Pink and Blue project when she noticed that her own daughter was interested in only wearing pink and playing with pink toys and collecting pink. And so there's a whole series of these, Pink and Blue. And she told the children to give me a masculine pose, give me a feminine pose. And this is what they did. And that's a real collection of a real little girl, of all of her pink things. And again, it's kind of the consumerism trap. So the next category I want to talk about is pink as protest. And the game that I have for this is not a game, it's a toy. It could be called a game, or playground equipment games. I don't know. Who cares, right? But are you guys all aware of this piece already? Yeah, so this is a piece done by an architect out of Berkeley. And what he did is he put pink seesaws through the border wall. And this side is Mexico, and this side is the United States. That's in 2019. In Juarez. Yeah. So here's a close-up of the play. Now the seesaws are hot pink because it's to commemorate the femicide that happened in the 1990s, and so he was tapping into that. That's how it becomes play as protest. Pink is protest. Yeah. This is my work. This is a dice game that I made back in 2013. And in this game, you can play, there are 3 players, the woman, the left-wing liberal, and the right-wing fundamentalist. And so as you play the game, you score to see whether or not Roe versus Wade gets reversed. And I made that game in 2013. I saw it coming. And so this is a new piece I have that's called The Dobbs Decision. Kind of a follow-up piece. There are no rules to this one, but you can imagine what the rules are. And so along that same line of thought, there's a whole movement called Code Pink. Are you guys aware of Code Pink? And Code Pink, what they do is they are basically lobbying and pushing forward political agendas that help women and those who are have less privilege towards more equality and support. And it's a wonderful group. And this is on their website. I just had to put that in as a slide. And so you can actually sign up so you can see what they're doing as an organization. I love that. I wish they would do that. Actually paint it that color. And so in India, there's something similar happening. This is the Gulabi Gang, and how this organization began is a woman saw another woman being beaten by a man for whatever reason, and she said, "No, you need to stop that." So he turned on her. So the next day, she went back with a stick and pretty much gave him the beating of his life, right? And so women began to organize in India in order to stop the violence against women in India. And so their symbol is the bright pink sari. And of course, we have to mention Silence Equals Death, which was a whole movement during the beginning of the AIDS epidemic to try to increase awareness. And what they did is they took the symbol of the triangle that the Nazis used and inverted it. So during World War II, people, the LGBTQ community were rounded up, and they were forced to wear these triangles to designate that they were LGBTQ, right? And so you can see that it was quite the symbol to take it and like give it a new meaning and flip the script. And this is post-commodity, and I wanted to bring it up because not all pink is visual. There is pink noise, right? And this pink noise piece that Post-Commodity did, it serves as kind of a border. It was shown at Documenta, and you had to go through it in order to experience the rest of the show. Okay, and so it was interesting how they reclaimed the idea of a border with pink noise. Right. And so how is this connected to the history of art? And what I see Post-Commodity doing is they're taking colonization and they are flipping the script. They're turning it around. So pink started as an import from Sumatra and India through the Brazil wood that you've already been aware that Helen brought up at the beginning, right? And this is a illustrated manuscript from the 1400s. You can see that the garment is this bright pink, right? So this had just arrived in Europe. And then what happened was that the Brazil wood and stuff, it migrated to what is now Brazil, hence that's where it got its name, and where the pigment was discovered by the colonizers. And so that was brought back to Europe, and now it was more affordable, and so it was everywhere. It took a couple hundred years, but that's what it did. And so along the same line of thought, it's like boys were dressed in pink because they were considered to have a more rosy sort of future than girls. And girls were dressed in blue because it's depressing to be a girl. And so I think that's the history that Post-Commodity is really tapping into and flipping it around. And so my last category is pink is healing. And so this is a game called Flower. So I don't know if you caught what just happened in the game, but the environment was healed by the petals, right? So this game has an environmental message. The protagonist is the wind. You play the wind, and you pick up petals. And as you pick up petals, you heal the areas of the environment that have been polluted or overdeveloped in some way, and bring them back to life. And 2007? 2007. Yeah. And so this is connected to contemporary history. And I wonder if they played the game first, because this work came after the game. And so I don't know if you know this work is installation work using flowers and petals. It's ephemeral. The flowers do die during the installation, and at the end of the installation is junk. It's trash, it's thrown away, right? It's about that ephemeral experience. But it has the same kind of like joyous wonder that the video game flower has. And this is a piece called The Womb. And the last artist I wanted to bring in is this artist. He's doing really interesting things with flowers. He actually shot these flowers into space and documented the whole thing. And he says, you know, I don't want to really lead people to it, but yes, it does have an environmental message. And so he lights flowers on fire, and he freezes them, and he shoots them into space, and he's trying to make people come to their own conclusion about the environment and global warming and the predicament that we're in. And so I see a real connection of this work with the game Flower. And again, it came after the game, so I'm wondering if the game was actually an influence on these artists. And that's it.
Do we have any questions specific to some of these game and color theories that we've just discussed? I was curious if you could speak to, we had a question earlier, and that was about the difference between pink and red, and I was just curious, since we heard about it from the natural world, from your perspective, the way that we emote pink and the way that we respond to it.
The way we emote pink? I see it all out there. You know, pink first appeared in my own work back in 1989 when I was trained as an abstract expressionist painter, and I noticed I was in Corpus Christi, Texas, and the sky was just amazing at sunset and at sunrise. And I tried to capture the colors, and pink became a very prevalent color in my paintings at that time. And so I think that, the color pink can sometimes arrive in people's work through nature and that kind of experience. But then, you know, later on, I had this huge, realization about the symbology of the color pink and the significance of it and how I could use it differently. How it could be a political message. And I think that sometimes that is the gateway that people walk through, right? So
it's really remarkable the different emotions that we've tied to pink over time. The innocent babies, the color of seduction, the color of protest, be a warning and a danger of imminent death. So I'm going to give you just a little bit more information about pink as it starts to appear in fashion design. And really just a perfect segue from what you were talking about. And so what I just really want to make sure everyone understands is pink has been beloved by everyone since we first figured out how to affix pink onto textiles. It's very rare, it's very challenging, it's very expensive. So everybody's going to want it. And that's always been the history of pink. We see it early on in French court, where our fashion rules were established. And that was really very purposeful from the kings to keep the court busy. If you're spending all of your money and all of your time to make sure you have your morning ensemble and your afternoon ensemble and your dinner dress, everything lined up and it's the very best quality, then you're not going to have time or money to revolt and overthrow the government. So they're actually very, very smart. But what we see are just some beautiful examples of the many ways that pink has shown up in men's fashion during this time. Because pink only became genderized and polarized really in the 1800s, and we have marketing and the rise of department stores to really thank for that. But this is a time period of these gorgeous powdered wigs. We have blue ones, we have green ones, we have pink ones, and of course we have white ones. But that gendering of pink is solidified in the 1950s. And you were really touching upon that in your post-World War II images. looking at the way that pink was used to create this ultra feminine experience in the home, because we have men coming back from war. Now we need women to return to the home. We need a baby boom. We need to grow the economy. And the pink cloud bride is our perfect pathway to build families, buy cars, pay for college education, have picnics, and return and restore our economy. And so this is a punch-out doll book from the 1950s. You'll see this up in the exhibition. But I had received a phone call about a pink wedding gown from the mid-1950s that was available, and only then did I even discover that that was a moment in wedding fashion. It had happened so fast in wedding fashion. But when we were talking about the way in the natural world that birds and other animals use touches of pink to communicate alluring things or warnings, humans too have been co-opting and using these colors to express these very important messages. Max Factor, Revlon, Elizabeth Arden, those are some of our earliest cosmetic companies, and some of the colors that they would name these pinks are really fantastic. We've got cactus pinks and desert pinks. As we move through into our shimmery 60s and 70s, we get all of these fantastic metallics inspired by the space race. But we cannot forget about some of these key moments in men's fashion. About the 1800s, men's fashion you got the three-piece suit and the tuxedo, and then it wasn't incredibly interesting for a bit longer. But the rise of the peacock revolution in the 1960s, 70s, think the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper album cover, David Bowie, some of these artists moving into the 70s and the 80s that were flamboyant and colorful and wearing pink because it's a powerful color. Today we've got exciting celebrities and films and actors and sports athletes wearing pink in non-ironic ways. They're wearing it because they love pink, because it's a powerful color, it's a bold color. And so this is a photograph of one of the ensembles up in the gallery. It was worn by Post Malone to the Grammys in 2019. It is called a nudie suit. It's inspired by a style of suit from the 1960s and 70s by Ukrainian immigrant Nudie Cohen, who created these highly stylized suits. You see them on Liberace and Elvis during the period. The idea here is that pink is a beloved color. It's incredibly a wide variety of hues, and it's just such a wonderful celebration today in our gallery, all of these gorgeous colors. So I invite you, after tonight or another evening, go up in the gallery, see all the varieties of pinks, the different ways they've been rendered on color. They've been roller printed on the surface in our 1820s and 1860s garments. They've been saturated into the dyes in other time periods, painted onto the surface of leathers later. So a lot of incredible colors to explore. And that, I think, is my trip through the history of pink. And now I'd like to hand it over to Karan Feder to speak about the pinkification of clothes from Barbie.
So when Helen asked me to speak about the clothes within Barbie's wardrobe that were pink, I thought, well, that's a fairly straightforward prospect. And when I really started to focus my eye on just the pink garments, there really was a much more fascinating story to be told here. In my work with the exhibition, I had such a large footprint of so many garments. I really never really focused on just the pink things. But this exercise really proved to be very, very fascinating and interesting to me. So in fact, Barbie's first 22 outfits introduced in 1959, there were only 2 pink colored outfits. And And if you look at, this is a picture from our previous exhibition, but these are the same first 22 you will see in the exhibition upstairs. And you might notice that the predominant color here is blue, which makes sense because blue happens to be the most favored color in the world. Of all colors, in general, blue is the most favored color. So the first pink outfit is this wonderful nighty negligee set. There's a little peignoir and a matching nightie, and you'll note that it is in the hue of what we call lingerie pink, barely there pink. And also pictured is the original illustration from 1958 that advertised to the market that they could buy this nighty negligee set for $3. The second outfit from 1922 that is pink is Plantation Belle. And our extant example in the exhibition is quite faded, and you can barely read the pink, but if you reference the illustration, you can see the pink parts and you can also see the pink parts on the accessories from the surviving accessories. The pearls are pink, and you'll see the handbag, the mule shoes are pink. So that's it for the two pink outfits in 1959. There's an additional pink offering, not a garment, but an accessory. And this outfit, Suburban Shopper, came with a wonderful pink rotary telephone. And this is kind of fascinating. The illustration seen on the left is the 1958 illustration, and you'll notice that a blue phone is pictured. As far as I know, this Suburban Shopper was never shipped with blue phones, but only with pink phones. So you'll often see that happen with these illustrations, which I think predated the actual manufacturing of the Barbie pieces. And so sometimes color choices changed along the way. But the same outfit, Suburban Shopper, was made even into 1963, and so you can see the illustration on the right has revised the phone color to represent a wonderful little pink rotary phone. So the symbolism of this phone is that it signals that the design team is cognizant of trends and themes in consumer products. And here is a fantastic illustration from Life, photographic illustration from Life magazine, 1958, where we see a woman sitting in her pastel dress, in her pastel bedroom, talking on her pink pastel phone. So we are quite aware that the Barbie team knows what's going on in the world in terms of things that one might want to buy in this era. The next year, 1960, the Barbie design team only released 6 new outfits, and only one was pink, and it is this iconic enchanted evening gown. And again, it's the very carnation light pink color. And this was one of the looks that Margot Robbie had replicated for her pink carpet tour to support the recent Barbie movie. And Margot's outfit was created by Vivienne Westwood. So these carry cases started to make the scene in the early 60s, and they were designed to hold all of Barbie's clothing and accessories. And this is the very first pink one we see in 1963. Again, it's this light color pink. And this case is unusual because it is designed to hold both Barbie's things and her boyfriend's things. And so this is the interior. And you can see the interior is color-coded, where Ken gets the blue side and Barbie gets the pink side. So you've probably noticed that all of the pink examples in Barbie's closet up until this point have been this barely there pink range, which is quite in contrast to what we now think of as Barbie pink. So this pastel shade represented the popular culture of the 1950s when Barbie's team was first designing pieces for her wardrobe. And it validates the fact that the team is reflecting culture rather than getting ahead of culture, that Barbie, in fact, represents her fellow life-size people out there. And of course, one could, if you wanted, you could get lots of light carnation pink things, including a washer and dryer or various appliances for your kitchen. You could even buy an automobile that was pink. And in the upper right, we see a typical pastel flavored fashion advertisement from that same era. So this is a super significant piece that happened in 1963. And this is called the Sparkling Pink Gift Set. And firstly, it's significant because it is not the sparkling yellow gift set. It is not the sparkling blue gift set. But there seems to be an intentional selection of making a gift set, which was new to the Barbie folks, intentionally making this pink. And second, the significance here is that for the first time we see in her swimming suit a deviation, an evolution in the pink hue. This is a brighter, hotter, more playful, I call this a bubblegum pink, and this is a pink that transitions us into the 60s. So we're moving away from a 50s carnation pink into a more playful, bubblegummy 60s pink here. And here's another great pink showstopper from 63, again in this brighter, happier pink. And this outfit for Barbie is called Sophisticated Lady. And I believe that it is probably inspired by a Givenchy gown from a few years earlier. And the fashion, the detail that's most significant here is that interesting gravity-defying pleat that sticks up from the waistline and cascades down the side of the skirt. And so by the late 60s, we see that this bubblegum pink is really all over, not just fashion, life-size cultural fashion, but Barbie has also embraced this new shade of pink. And most of her fashion offerings include this hotter, happier 60s pink. Jumping into the 70s, in general, in the culture, pink wasn't terribly important when we were out buying clothes. We experienced the Earth movement in the 1970s. The first Earth Day was 1970. And if you remember, we had the bicentennial in 1976. And so we saw a lot of red, white, and blue right before and after the bicentennial. And denim was an incredibly important trend in fashion. So the closet you're looking at here is Barbie from 74 and 75. And there's very little pink seen. Which makes sense because, as we know, Barbie followed fashion. She didn't get ahead of fashion. And the doll trunk that's shown is also interesting. We see pink in the background, but neither of the outfits that Barbie is wearing have any pink in them. By the late 70s, pink has made a comeback, and this is a wonderful pink disco dress that Barbie sported in 1977. And you see the life-size example of another glittery, disco-y, shiny dress, excellent for dancing, and the matching skull cap made out of sequins. So this is a stronger pink even than the 60s pink. This is a more stronger pink heading into sort of a magenta flavor in the pinks. And then in this slide, we see both the life-size example and the Barbie example influenced by the French designer Thierry Mugler. And he, at this point in time in the late 80s, was designing very highly engineered sculptural kind of skirt suits that this knockoff from Lily Rubin is perfectly wonderful and exactly expresses what we saw walk down the Mugler runway at this point in time. And of course, Barbie is also influenced by that same runway. And what's interesting is that on the Mugler runway at this period of time, he often had canines with the models on the runway. And we see that Barbie also loved that idea. And she has her own poodle with a matching collar that matches her very magenta pink outfit. And so I feel that this pink is awfully close to what we now call Barbie pink. But this level of pink will not be formalized for another 20 years. And finally in 2011, Barbie pink is officially formulated and trademarked as Pantone 219C. So it's a special chemical formulation that is assigned to Barbie. And this is what we now visualize as Barbie pink. And this doll we see here was introduced to celebrate this Pantone 219C. It's a novelty collector doll within the offerings. And it's called Pink and Pantone Barbie. And it's not really until this point in time that this color pink hue becomes the signature Barbie pink. It really took until 2011 for Mattel to say, okay, this is what our pink. And going forward, I think that the evolution will continue. I think it is really related to what's going on in the culture and in fashion. And I think the door is open for something like Barbie blue even in the future. So we'll just have to follow along and see where this goes. So thank you for exploring the topic.
Thank you, Karen. That was really informative. So I wanted to open it up to our audience if we have some questions that you'd like to pose to our panelists this evening. We've got one up at the top.
Why did you that Barbie followed? This was a charge from Mattel to Barbie's fashion designers that Barbie was not particularly fashion forward. She was supposed to represent what her peers, if her peers were life-size people, what her peers were wearing. And they were so adamant about this that at one point in time, they created a secondary character within the Barbie family. Her name was Francie. And Francie was described by Mattel as the mod cousin, so that Francie could wear the super forward, kind of risque pieces that were coming out of the London scene at that point in time. But Barbie never could wear that. That was a little bit too risque and forward for Barbie. So Barbie always stayed within a certain box, that whatever that box was that Mattel decided was more conservative than Francie. So Barbie really, I think that I've seen some outfits that Francie had that I would say that's pretty forward, right? That you saw very few people walking on the street wearing those. But Barbie stuff you could safely put on. If there was a life-size version, you could safely put them on and you would be welcomed walking anywhere.
And what's really special about that is by looking at Barbie, we're seeing the evolution of fashion. And so even though she may not have been changing fashion at the time, by the end of the story, we see now Barbie in fashion and beyond, with designers turning to Barbie and the influence that she had and the impact.
Yes, and what's interesting about that is that turn of the tables in 2015, where we see a professional fashion designer looking to Barbie as his muse, most everything that walked down the runway that he was inspired by Barbie was in fact pink. So So that relationship between Barbie and Pink really was solidified, I think, at, you know, the teens, the 20 teens. That 2011 was sort of the tipping point, and I think they really, you know, they sort of had to own it at that point. But so when I look back at that Moschino, that 2015 Moschino catwalk where Barbie was the muse, most everything, the most successful pieces were in fact pink. And they weren't just all the new Barbie pink. There were lots of carnation pinks, and but pink was the predominant hue that he chose to represent his muse and Barbie.
Got a question right over here. Well, I do know, at least from the fashion world, color forecasting is a critical part of how the whole pipeline of design and manufacturing happens, and that's forecasted years and years into the future, because that impacts car colors, paint colors for houses, and then when we're thinking about how that works its way into game design, I mean, that I would assume that does marketing, when you're thinking about games, is that part of the conversation much, or is it more development of what colors you're choosing, how that's going to impact the experience?
So I'm a game designer, so don't know a lot about marketing, but you know what, I'm wondering when war games are going to pick up on the color pink that's been used to diminish violence. Like, you're all aware that in the prison system here in Arizona, pink underwear was introduced in order to decrease violence. They did some sort of scientific study, and that color reduces violence in the population. So the theory goes, right? And so I haven't seen too many war games that have like picked up on that and tried to incorporate that color pink into you know, even like scenes of you know, POWs and things like that. So there, I think there's some things that games have overlooked a little bit with the color pink, and there's a lot of open area to explore it still. And so the future of pink in games, I think it's wide open. I think it's as far as our imagination can take us. And as we push forward as a community, pushing our medium more towards art, I think that those kinds of considerations will be thoughtfully introduced, not only into indie games, but into AAA mainstream games.
Fashion Group International puts out a really great trend forecast every year, and so they're always a really great place to reference. Then I know color forecasting is something that people pay for to have access to. Got a question in the back? Yes, sir? Is that an event? Would it be pink? Oh, would it? Oh, I guess I.
That would be wonderful. Let's make a game. I want to do it.
Do we have another question? Right here in the front?
Do you have any ads to go Barbie in the South?
Repeat the question.
I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry. Well, you know, like I said, I believe that the tipping point in terms of the use of the brand of Barbie Pink happened at 2011. And you're hard pressed not to find a Barbie collection that has at least a half to a quarter of it pink going forward every single season, which was not the case before that. So I think in that sense, it is significant because in a way, the Barbie brand has sort of changed direction. And even when there wasn't a lot of pink out there in the fashion industry, Barbie was wearing a lot of pink just because it became her signature thing and it sort of defined the brand. So, the rules of the game for Barbie have changed a little bit in modern times since that 2011. So, you know, like today we're all wearing pink, you know, everyone has their pink. And most of these pinks are super bright, hot, happy, you know, fun pink, sort of what we think of as Barbie pink today. So, but again, I really think that I don't know what Barbie pink is going to look like in 20 years. We may like love this carnation Barbie pink again. You know, we don't, how do we know? We have no idea. And there may be, like I was thinking about, I've read about this new black paint color that is so intense. It's an entirely new paint, an entirely new black color because it is so deep and so black. And I wonder if something like that may eventually be invented for pink, or something, a sort of color you want to fall into, that it's so intense. So maybe that, you know, I don't know, I'm just projecting.
I saw some other hands up. Yes.
Do you think there's a scientific overlap with male animals being more flamboyant and colorful to attract mates, and pink's prevalence once it became available with nobility in Europe and then with young boys? And then, sorry, this is kind of a double-pronged question. And in that context, for anyone who'd like to answer, can you pinpoint or note some moment or event or reason where pink became sort of like emasculating for conservative men to where it's now a more feminine color?
Hop on that one. Pink is a less saturated version of red. Red is the color of military power and passion. Strong, bold, masculine color. We can see that out on the field. And so pink is a less saturated version of that. And so pink was very favored for men and women, boys and girls. But to speak to the polarization and the gendering of it, that's really an 1800s construct. So when we have the creation of ready-to-wear clothing, that means you no longer have to make something specific to your size. You can go to the store and you can purchase things that are going to be close to your size, and then you can adjust it when you get home. But that's a new concept in mass-producing clothing that we hadn't had yet. But at the same time, we have companies that are marketing products to us, and they're coming up with these concepts of linking different products together. And so the idea of creating collections of product, all pink for girls, all blue for boys, was really born through marketing companies. And so once we move into the 20th century, that concept of this color is more associated with baby girls and this color is more associated with baby boys is so deeply ingrained in our social experience and in our material culture that ship has been so hard to turn around. Then Teresa's presentation then touched upon some of those incredibly significant moments in World War II where the color was co-opted to identify an entire group of people in a very shaming and dramatic fashion that then was co-opted later become a positive color and symbol. And so it's that intentionality that humans have placed on the color, and it has changed over time. I think that kind of addresses some of your question. Anyone else want to hop in?
Yeah, if I can, just on the sex differences and sex roles. I think it's peculiar in the natural world where when you see pink, it's either in both sexes or just in males. I don't know of a single example where it's exclusively in females. And that kind of goes back to the rarity, the boldness. I think many female animals, being especially invertebrates, right, being the ones that lay the eggs or raise the young, standing out is at great risk, right? Because it could lead to your lack of survival, your death, and maybe the loss of young, right? So a lot of female animals tend to want to blend in and not stand out. And then flip that to humans, right? I mean, I think back to the pigments that I was talking about in flamingos, those same pigments, of course, in our diets, they're also in our skin. And in fact, they're more enriched in the skin of women than men, which give them sort of the fairer, pinker, hues compared to the darker, on average, skin of men. But as with reflecting on the bowerbirds, there's additional things you can add on, and that includes ornaments like clothing or makeup, and that goes beyond the skin. And I think in a mutual sex-rolled species like humans, right, where the fathers and mothers contribute equally in the choice of partners and the raising of young, there's good reason to anticipate that both sexes could capitalize on pink to be bold and stand out.
Did we have some more questions in the room? One more. I had a. Yeah, it's great. Thank you, sir.
I don't know if this is does anyone know bar?
The whole genre has been valued in an entirely different way. And in a crazy way, in that, for instance, like not Ken, what's the other guy's name? Alan dolls are like through the roof. Like, if you could get an original Alan doll, good luck. Yeah, exactly. He's so popular that they had to retro him. It's so crazy, but it has made a difference on the value of the vintage pieces. And I think probably that it has brought more collectors to the table in general. And so Mattel will just keep making more and more and more, and everyone will have to just keep collecting more and more and more. It's actually a brilliant marketing concept. Yeah. So the collector's name is David Porcello, and he is a vintage fashion aficionado. And so he had been collecting vintage fashion for his whole life. And I told the story earlier where David tells this wonderful story about when he was 8 years old and it was his birthday, and his mother asks him, "What do you want for your birthday?" And David says, "Well, I've had my eye on this dress I saw down at the Goodwill." So David's collection, so he was just always like into this. And part of his vintage fashion collection included vintage Barbie fashion. And so this was just part of he was just drawn to the little miniature fashion that he was already loving in life-size fashion. And he realized, so David's a little younger, so David's like in his 50s or so, so he would have started collecting in the 60s when he was young. And he had this goal of collecting every bit of fashion that was released for Barbie from 59 to 99, and he was part of his mission in collecting. So that's how he got started, because he loved clothes. It wasn't that he loved the doll. He was really never that interested in Barbie the doll. He was interested in the little miniature fashion. So that's the crazy thing about this project for me. I was not a Barbie girl. And before I started this project, I really knew nothing about Barbie. The only Barbie I had as a child were hand-me-downs from the girl across the street. grew out of her Barbies. My mother was not, she was of an era where Barbie was not going to be representing what she wanted her daughter to be playing with. I think it was a little too curvy for her at that point in time. I'm not sure exactly. But no, I didn't really have a lot of experience with Barbie, but I would have to say now my favorite Barbie era in terms of clothing is her 60s mod London girl looks. I love all that space age stuff and those skirts that stick straight out and all that metallic fibers. I just love all that stuff, all the plastics, the vinyls that are used in those dresses and clothing and little purse accessories and stuff. That's my favorite era.
Well, we got a question right over here. Great.
Yes, he did. He's got most everything, and there was the only thing that we weren't able to find for the exhibit. There's only a single replica in the exhibit upstairs, and that is the 1959 teeny compact case that came with Roman Holiday. And my theory concerning why that compact case is so difficult to find now is that it was so teeny is that when the package was opened by the 8-year-old, that compact case immediately flew into the air, disappeared into the carpeting, never to be seen again. So I think that all the compact cases are stuck into the carpeting all over the United States. But there are so few of those compact cases that an ancillary market has sprung up to make replicas of these teeny compact cases. So that is the one replica that you see in the exhibit. But the rest is all part of his collection.
We've got one last question. Yes, Joy.
That's a great question. I think it does mirror some of the other brightly colored trends you see in the tropics, right? So day length tends to be long and consistent at the equator. Lots of just, think of tropical animals, and you either traveled to Costa Rica or Panama or Brazil, Africa, even Australia. We don't have as many here in North America and Europe. And I think it again, it's probably a trend that mirrors even some of the saturated reds, oranges, and yellows, where we've got a number of those here in in North America, Europe, but not as many as in some of those tropical regions.
That's a great question. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you to our panelists. This evening was produced by our incredible education department. Please hop on the website and check out all of the interesting events that they have lined up for the rest of the season. Please check out Arizona Costume Institute. Come back and visit us on Wednesdays. And Karen, I believe you do have a few minutes available to do a little bit of book signing up by the store on your way out. Please stop in the museum store. Drive safely, and thank you so much for coming out tonight.